The voice came first. Not his name. Not a question. Just words falling through the air like stones into water. Heavy, formal, carrying the weight of something irreversible. Structural negligence resulting in the deaths of 3 citizens. Willful falsification of safety documentation. Conspiracy with unauthorized contractors. These charges demand the full penalty of law. Light. Too bright. His eyes were barely open. Emery tried to move his hands. They didn't respond right. The fingers were longer. The palms rougher. Calluses in strange places. Inside the thumb. Across the base of the fingers. Draftsman's hands. Architect's hands. Not his hands. Wrong. Something is wrong. Where am I? Marble. Everywhere. White columns rising toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Tiered seating packed with hundreds of figures in formal robes. The air smelled like old stone and candle wax and something sharper underneath. Fear. The body's fear. This body had been afraid here before. The accused will face the council. The accused. They meant him. He was standing on a raised platform in the center of the chamber, wearing black formal robes with something torn from the chest. A seal. Some insignia. Removed. A defendant's circle. He was on trial. I was in my apartment. I was reading. There was a novel, an architect, a trial, memories crashed together. His own life, graduate school, architectural history, late nights with fantasy novels. And someone else's life pressing in underneath. Drafting tables. Sleepless nights. Professional pride so heavy it bent the spine. The exact moment the news had reached him. A building collapsed. 3 dead. Your design. Your fault. Thorn. He was in Thorn's body. The disgraced architect. The scapegoat. The man who was going to die in less than 48 hours. No. The word came out hoarse. Wrong. A figure near the front turned. Older man. Gray hair swept back from a sharp face. Beater. Emery could tell somehow. Embroidered robes. Official. Blueprints in one hand. Expression of careful blankness. You speak, Architect Thorn. Polite contempt. The council welcomes your defense. If you have one. Garrett Vex. The name surfaced from Thorn's memories like a body rising from deep water. Chief architect. Political climber. The man who had smiled across meeting tables while dismantling Thorn's career piece by piece. I didn't, Emery started. Stopped. What could he say? I woke up in this body 3 minutes ago. I don't know where I am. I'm not the person you're accusing. Vex's eyebrows rose. You didn't what? You didn't falsify safety reports? You didn't alter load-bearing specifications? You didn't stand on that site the morning of the collapse arguing about whether the walls would hold. He gestured smoothly. We have witnesses. A man stepped forward from the crowd. Construction supervisor. Calloused hands. Eyes that flicked toward Vex twice before settling on the floor. I was there, the supervisor said. Flat. Rehearsed. The architect came to the site that morning. Agitated. Argued with the foreman about the load-bearing wall. Said reinforcement wasn't necessary. Threatened to have him removed. Lie. Complete lie. Thorn's memories surged, hot and jagged. He'd been in the city archives that morning, cross-referencing historical building codes. Timestamps. A librarian who brought him tea. Records that proved his location. But the original Thorn had been too proud to call witnesses. Too certain his reputation would speak for itself. It hadn't. He'd been arrested that evening. And now he was going to die. And I'm going to die in his place. Emery's vision blurred. His borrowed heart beat too fast. Thorn had been calm in the face of ruin. Stiff, controlled, proud. Emery was none of those things. Architect. Vex's voice sharpened. Have you nothing to say? A pulse. Not his heartbeat. Something outside. Something pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. Steadier, deeper, resonating at a frequency that shouldn't exist. Emery's head snapped up. The observer's box. Elevated above the chamber. A single figure in dark blue robes. Young, late 20s. Dark hair pulled back from a face of sharp angles and controlled stillness. Eyes fixed on Emery with an intensity that felt like standing too close to a fire. Lysander Cormac. The name arrived with a flood of emotion that wasn't his. Longing. Regret. Years of silence and stolen glances. Thorn had loved this man. Had studied beside him a decade ago. Had watched him be chosen for political duty and swallowed every word he'd wanted to say. The medallion around Lysander's neck was glowing. Blue light. Soft at first, then brighter. A historian's artifact, truth medallion, keyed to recognize honesty. Pulsing in rhythm with the panic in Emery's chest. And suddenly Emery couldn't breathe. Not from fear. From presence. The Alpha's attention pressed against him like a physical weight. Not aggressive, but unavoidable. Complete. He can hear me. The thought was irrational. Impossible. And absolutely certain. He can hear everything. The transmigration. The truth about the collapse. Thorn's feelings. Everything. Vex was still speaking. Emery couldn't hear him anymore. The medallion's light was cutting through the chaos in his head like a blade through fog. Lysander's hand moved to the artifact. Touched it. Held it. Their eyes met across the impossible distance of the chamber. And the world shifted. The council adjourned for deliberation. 30 minutes. Maybe less. Guards escorted Emery to a holding chamber beneath the main floor. Stone and shadow. No windows. A single oil lamp on a rusted bracket. The door closed with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Emery stood in the center of the room. Didn't sit. His body, Thorn's body, was shaking. The torn seal on his chest felt like an open wound. 48 hours. Vex won't wait for the full trial. He'll push for immediate execution. I read this story. I know how it ends. Except he didn't. Not anymore. In the novel, Thorn had died. Executed at dawn. A footnote in Lysander's larger tragedy. But the medallion hadn't been in the novel. The door opened. Not guards. Not Vex. A single figure in dark blue robes, the medallion still glowing at his throat. Stepping into the holding chamber like he had every right to be there. Lysander Cormac. Up close, he was different than the novel had described. The book had called him cold, politically brilliant, emotionally unreachable. The real person standing 3 feet away was none of those things. Dark eyes. Tired eyes. Jaw tight with barely controlled fury. His scent, cedarwood and old paper and something authoritative, filled the small room without effort. The guard has been dismissed, Lysander said. Low. Controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command. We have 20 minutes before the council reconvenes and Vex realizes I'm not in the observation box. Emery's throat tightened. Why are you here? Because you're not Thorn. The words landed like a physical blow. Simple. Certain. No hesitation. Emery stared. I don't. You don't need to lie. Lysander stepped closer. The medallion pulsed brighter with every inch of reduced distance. The artifact doesn't allow it. Every thought you've had since you entered that chamber has been broadcast directly to me. Your panic. Your confusion. The fact that you know things about this trial that haven't happened yet. The fact that you know things about me that no one should know. He heard everything. The transmigration. The novel. The assassination. Thorn's feelings. My. Yes, Lysander said quietly. All of it. The room tilted. Emery caught himself on the edge of a wooden table. You believe me? It was the wrong question. The only question. Lysander's expression shifted. The handwriting on Vex altered blueprints uses the old council script system. Discontinued 12 years ago. Before I was appointed. Before Thorn was licensed. Whoever forged those documents made an error only someone outside the current system would make. A pause. That was my first clue. Your panic was the second. The medallion was the third. You already suspected the charges were false. I suspected. Now I know. Why? Emery's voice tore out of him. Why would you care? You're the Regent. Vex is your rival. Defending me could destroy everything. You have no reason. I have every reason. The medallion pulsed hard. Emery felt it like a hand pressed against his sternum. Thorns studied under the same master architect as me. 10 years ago. We shared drafting tables. We argued about distribution and arch support and limestone curing. I was chosen for political duty before I could finish my apprenticeship. Lysander's eyes held his. But I heard about him. Through friends. Through colleagues. Through quiet conversations where his name was mentioned and I pretended not to be listening. The air had changed. Thicker. Warmer. I've known about his feelings for 3 years, Lysander continued. Someone told me. Gently. As if it were a secret I had the right to know. And I never reached out. I told myself it was politics. Distance. The impossibility of a regent and a disgraced architect. He stopped. But the truth is simpler. I was afraid. Afraid that if I saw him again, I'd have to admit I'd been thinking about him for 10 years. That I'd been measuring everyone against the memory of a man I studied beside at 18. That admiration had become something else and I had no idea what to do with it. Emery couldn't move. Thorn's emotions were surging up from somewhere deep. Years of longing, years of silence, years of believing he was invisible. He knew. All this time. He knew. The medallion, Emery whispered. You wore it deliberately. Yes. You wanted it to activate. Lysander's gaze didn't waver. I wanted to hear the truth from him directly. Not through rumors. Not through third parties. From him. What he felt. Whether any of it was real. A pause. Then I arrived, and the person in the defendant's circle wasn't him. Emery's chest cracked open. The tears came without warning, hot and sudden, spilling down cheeks that didn't feel like his. The original Thorn had never cried. Pride had held him together like iron bands. But Emery wasn't Thorn. And the relief of being believed, truly believed, by the one person who mattered, was unbearable. I don't know how to do this, Emery said broken. I don't know how to be him. How to defend a man I never met. How to survive this. Lysander didn't move toward him. Didn't offer comfort. But he didn't leave. You're not Thorn, he said quietly. But you're wearing his body. His memories. His knowledge. You have access to everything he knew about the collapse. About Vex. About the corruption. A pause. And you have me. Emery looked up. I've been investigating Vex for 18 months. I have partial evidence of 3 other structural cover-ups. Engineers loyal to me. The burned memo from the collapse site. Lysander held his gaze. What I don't have is someone who can read the architecture from inside. Someone who knows what Thorn knew about the building's original design. You want me to help you investigate. I want you to help me expose the truth. If we can prove the collapse was a structural flaw Vex tried to fix secretly, and that the fix failed, we can clear Thorn's name. Stop the execution. Bring down the faction protecting Vex. And if we can't? Lysander didn't answer. He didn't need to. If you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Patreon, where you'll also get access to exclusive and uncensored stories I can't post on YouTube. The noose was still waiting. Outside the chamber, a bell rang. The council was reconvening. 20 minutes had passed too fast. Lysander reached up and removed the medallion. The connection flickered, not broken, but stretched. He pressed the artifact into Emery's palm. Keep this. The bond will hold within range. If Vex tries to separate us, if the council moves against you before I return, the medallion will let me find you. Emery stared at the glowing stone. This is priceless. You can't just. I didn't activate it for the trial. Lysander's voice dropped. Quiet. Almost gentle. I activated it because I've spent 10 years wondering what he would have said if I'd been brave enough to ask. And now you're here. Carrying his memories. His knowledge. The feelings he never got to express. He paused at the door. I'm not going to waste that chance. Then he was gone. Emery stood alone in the holding chamber, the medallion warm against his palm, the bond humming at the edge of his awareness. Outside, the council was gathering. Vex was preparing his final arguments. The execution was moving closer with every breath. But somewhere above him, Lysander was moving too. Not away. Toward the evidence. Toward the truth. Toward me. Emery closed his fingers around the medallion. He was still terrified. Still disoriented. Still trapped in a body that wasn't his, facing a death he hadn't earned. But for the first time since waking in this nightmare, he wasn't alone. And that changed everything. Lysander's private study was warm where the council chambers had been cold. Firelight. Books. Blueprints pinned to walls and marked with sharp handwriting. Leather and old paper and cedarwood. The scent that had filled the holding chamber when Lysander stood close. The medallion pulsed gently against Emery's chest. He had slipped the chain around his own neck, and the artifact had settled there like it belonged. It suits you. Emery turned. Lysander stood in the doorway in simpler clothes. Dark shirt. Loose sleeves. Strands of hair fallen across his forehead. He looked younger. Less like a political weapon. More like the 18-year-old apprentice Thorn had fallen in love with. The medallion, Lysander clarified. The blue matches Thorn's eyes. Emery's hand moved to the artifact. You said the bond holds within range. What's the range? The city walls. Approximately. It was designed centuries ago to connect a regent to their most trusted advisor. Most bearers find the constant connection exhausting. Do you? Silence. Then, no. The word was simple. But Emery felt the weight beneath it. Lysander's exhaustion, his relief, his carefully buried fear that this connection might be temporary. He's been alone for a long time. Lysander's head turned slightly. He had heard. Of course he had. Sit down. We have work to do. Documents spread across the desk. Blueprints. Council memos. Handwriting samples. A partially burned paper that still smelled of smoke. The memo, Lysander said, tapping it. Found at the collapse site. Vex seal. Discusses structural integrity concerns regarding the eastern load-bearing wall. Emery pulled it closer. The original Thorn's knowledge surfaced alongside his own graduate training, architectural terminology, structural principles, the specific failures of limestone foundations. This isn't about concerns, Emery said slowly. This acknowledges existing damage. Discretionary corrective measures. That's how you describe a problem you've already tried to fix in secret. Lysander's eyes sharpened. You're certain. Thorn is certain. He knew something was wrong with that building before the collapse. He filed a report about unusual settling 6 months ago. Vex rejected it. Called it alarmist. Thorn was officially reprimanded for causing unnecessary concern. Emery's voice strengthened. After the reprimand, Thorn was removed from the project. Vex assigned someone from his own office to oversee final inspections. A man named Harlow Decker. Decker signed off on the safety certificates Vex is now claiming Thorn falsified. Lysander had gone very still. Decker died 3 months ago. Fall from a balcony. Ruled accidental. Rain had begun falling against the tall windows. They killed him, Emery whispered. They killed Decker to keep him quiet, and when the building collapsed anyway, they needed someone else to blame. Someone already discredited. Someone whose internal complaints could be reframed as evidence of instability. Thorn, Lysander said. Thorn. The name hung between them like smoke. Emery looked down at his borrowed hands. He wasn't just proud. Everyone thought he was too proud to defend himself. But he was ashamed. He thought he should have fought harder. He thought the collapse was his fault because he didn't stop it when he had the chance. Lysander's expression cracked. Something beneath the controlled surface giving way. I didn't know that, he said. No one did. He never told anyone. The bond pulsed. Emery felt Lysander's grief pressing against his own. For the years of silence. For the conversations never had. For the truth buried beneath pride and politics. The assassination attempt, Emery said, forcing himself back to the present. Do you know about it? I suspected. 3 days from now. During the autumn festival address. One of your guards, Harris, has been taking payments from Vex faction. Information about your schedule initially. But the payment for the assassination is larger. Enough to disappear. You know this from the book. I read the chapter where you die. Emery's voice cracked. In the original version, without the medallion, Thorn is executed at dawn. You attend as a formality. You look exhausted. Then you go back to your office, and 3 days later Harris shoots you during the festival address. He paused. Vex becomes interim regent. The investigation dies. The collapse is blamed on Thorn. Everyone moves on. That was always the ending. Lysander didn't speak for a long moment. The fire had burned lower. Rain drummed against the windows. Then, very quietly, and the medallion. It wasn't in the book. You weren't supposed to activate it. None of this was supposed to happen. Silence. Then Lysander laughed. Not cold, not humorous. Surprised. As if the universe had presented something so unexpected that no other response was possible. I've spent 10 years trying to be the kind of regent my predecessors were. Calculating. Distant. He looked at Emery. And the one time I break every rule, the one time I let myself be guided by something other than strategy, I rewrite fate. Not accidentally, Emery said. You chose to wear the medallion. You chose to listen. I chose him. Lysander's voice dropped. I chose Thorn. Before I knew you existed. I chose the possibility of hearing his voice over the certainty of my own safety. The confession landed like a stone in still water. He loved you, Emery whispered. For 10 years. Without ever saying a word. He thought you never looked at him the same way. I looked. Lysander's voice was rough. Every time I saw him at council functions. Every time someone mentioned his name. Every time I passed a building he designed and felt, he stopped. I looked. I just never let myself be seen looking. Why? Because regents don't get to have this. Regents get alliances, political marriages, strategic partnerships. They don't get to fall in love with disgraced architects. They don't get to wear medallions that broadcast their feelings. He paused. They don't get to be seen. But you wore it anyway. I wore it because I was tired of being invisible. Lysander met his eyes. Not to the council. Not to the public. To him. Something broke in Emery's chest. Not painfully. Relievingly. Like pressure finally releasing. I'm not him. I'm carrying his memories. But I'm not the person you loved. I know, Lysander said quietly. But you're carrying him. And you're the one person who understands what he went through. What he deserved to hear. What did he deserve to hear? Lysander leaned forward. Firelight caught the angles of his face. That someone noticed. That 10 years of silence didn't mean 10 years of absence. He paused. That he mattered. Not as an architect. Not as a political pawn. As himself. Emery closed his eyes. The tears came again. Quiet this time. Grief. Relief. Gratitude. He would have wanted to hear that. I know. Lysander's voice was gentle. That's why I'm telling you. They worked until dawn. Not on feelings. On evidence. Lysander spread documents across every surface. Blueprints with Thorn's notes, witness statements, the burned memo, handwriting samples from Vex's office. Emery moved through them with Thorn's knowledge guiding his hands, identifying inconsistencies, cross-referencing dates, building a case that grew more damning with each hour. By the time grey light seeped through the windows, they had enough. The reinforcement was installed 2 years after completion, Emery said, pointing at the dates. Vex discovered the flaw during an inspection. Instead of reporting it, he hired his own crew to install supports. Poorly. Never documented. When the supports failed, he needed to destroy the evidence and blame someone else. And Decker was the loose end. He knew about the reinforcement. He signed paperwork proving Vex's involvement. So Vex killed him. Made it look accidental. Burned the documentation. then waited for the perfect scapegoat. Emery's voice hardened. Thorn. Already discredited. Already too proud to beg. Lysander's hand tightened on the desk. We need to examine the collapse site. Physical evidence, the reinforcement supports. If we can prove they were added post-construction, done poorly, never inspected. We establish Vex's direct involvement. Emery nodded. We should go this morning. And the assassination? I'll have Harris detained before the festival. The burned memo gives me justification. Lysander's expression flickered. Assuming we survive long enough to present the case. What do you mean? Lysander moved to the window, watching grey light spread across the city. Vex knows I'm investigating. He knows the medallion activated. He knows I spoke to you privately. He'll move against us before we can present evidence to the full council. How? Public accusation. He'll frame my support of you as corruption. Claim the bond is evidence of false intimacy, that you've manipulated me. He'll argue I'm compromised and demand my removal. A pause. It's what I would do. Emery's stomach twisted. Can he succeed? The council is divided. Some will support him. Some will support me. Some will wait to see which side wins. Lysander's jaw tightened. Yes, he can succeed. If enough members believe the bond has clouded my judgment. The bond reveals truth. I know. You know. Lysander met his eyes. But the council doesn't. And Vex is very good at making people believe what benefits him. The weight settled over them. Even with solid evidence, they might still lose, because Vex controlled the narrative. We need more than evidence, Emery said slowly. Thorn spent his life trying to be invisible, letting his work speak for itself. And it got him executed. He turned. We can't be quiet. We have to make them look. Lysander stared at him. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted. You sound like him. When we were students. He used to say, architecture isn't about buildings. It's about making people see what they've been ignoring. His voice was soft. I'd forgotten that. The medallion pulsed once. Warm. Steady. We should go, Emery said, before Vex realizes what we're doing. The ruins stood on the city's eastern edge, cold beneath a sky heavy with unfallen rain. Emery could smell the site before he saw it. Dust, wet stone, something darker. Workers moved through rubble under council supervision. But something was wrong. They're clearing debris, Emery said tightly. Removing evidence. Yes. Lysander signaled his team, 4 engineers in Regent's blue. That's why we're here. A man in Vex colors blocked their path. Your Highness. This site is restricted. Council orders. Lysander didn't slow. I am the council. Step aside. The man hesitated, then stepped back. Lysander's authority, for now, still held. They moved deeper into the ruins. The building had been beautiful once. Emery could see it in ornate stonework fragments, the careful proportions of remaining walls. Thorn had poured years into making something that would last. And Vex had destroyed it. The eastern wall, Emery said, moving toward the collapse point. The one Vex claimed Thorn sabotaged. It should be. He stopped. Beneath broken stone, metal supports were visible. Rusted. Poorly installed. Added long after original construction. Not original, one of Lysander's engineers confirmed, crouching to examine them. Installed later. Badly. Corroding already. Cheap material. Vex didn't want to spend money on a problem he was hiding. Emery moved deeper into the ruins, Thorn's knowledge guiding him. Here, this pillar should have been reinforced. Here, this arch was misaligned. Here, the wall had failed first. He stopped at a section of foundation. There's something here. Below the collapse point. Lysander moved beside him. What? A void. Thorn noticed it during construction. Vex's office told him to ignore it. Fill it with cheap concrete. Move on. Can we access it? Not from here. The collapse sealed the upper level. Emery stood. But there might be another entrance. If Vex was using this void, if he stored something there. We need to find it. Lysander turned to his team. Split up. Search for any access point to the lower foundation. The engineers scattered. And then voices. Loud. Official. Too many. Lysander turned. Council officials. A dozen. Led by the steward who had lied at the forum. No longer nervous. Armed. Your Highness. The steward's voice was calm. Too calm. The council requests your return. There are questions regarding your association with the condemned architect. Lysander's scent sharpened. Cedarwood and authority. The investigation is ongoing. I'll return when evidence is secured. Evidence will be handled by council officials. Guards moved forward. Please, don't make this difficult. Emery's hand moved to the medallion. The bond pulsed urgent warning. They're arresting us. Not requesting. Lysander's jaw tightened. On what grounds? Violation of council procedure. Unauthorized interference. Suspicion of corruption through false intimacy with a condemned criminal. The steward's eyes flicked to Emery. The medallion bond has been noted. Some might suggest you've been compromised. This is absurd. This is the council's will. The steward smiled. You may present your defense at the hearing, assuming you're still regent by then. The guards had formed a loose circle. Bells rang in the distance. Lysander looked at Emery. The bond pulsed between them. Fear, determination, and something steadier underneath. Trust me. Emery nodded. Barely. Lysander turned back. Very well. I'll accompany you. And the architect remains in my custody. He's a material witness. Removing him constitutes evidence destruction. The steward's smile flickered. Your Highness. Those are the terms. Lysander's voice dropped to absolute cold. Unless you'd like to explain to the full council why you're refusing to preserve evidence in a capital case. Silence. The steward's eyes darted toward his guards. Very well. But the architect will be confined to quarters. No communication. No documents. No privileges. Agreed. Guards moved forward. Hands closed around Emery's arms, separating him from Lysander. The medallion flared. Distance. They're creating distance. Lysander's eyes found his. Expression controlled. Unreadable. But the bond was screaming. Stay alive. Stay connected. I'll find you. Emery didn't answer. Couldn't. Guards pulled him toward a different exit, a different path. And as they crossed the threshold, Emery felt it. The medallion pulsing once, twice. Then dimming with every step of separation. Not broken. Not yet. But stretched thin. A thread connecting two people across a city doing everything in its power to tear them apart. The cell beneath the council chambers had no windows. Stone walls. Single lamp. A door that didn't open from the inside. Emery sat on the floor with his knees drawn up. The medallion hung around his neck. Dark. Completely dark. No pulse. No light. Whatever connection it had shared with Lysander was gone. Severed by distance, by council interference, by whatever method Vex people had used to block the bond. He didn't know which was worse. The darkness or the silence. Hours passed. Maybe many. Maybe few. The lamp burned steadily. Emery's borrowed heartbeat filled the room like a metronome counting down to nothing. This is how Thorn died. Not the execution. Before that. Alone. In a cell. In silence. Believing no one was coming. The original architect's memories surfaced unbidden. Thorn at drafting tables, creating beauty with pencil and ruler. Thorn receiving the first commendation, the first award, the first recognition from a council that would later destroy him. Thorn standing outside the Regent's office years ago, hand raised to knock, heart full of words he couldn't say, then turning away. Walking back to his empty studio, picking up his pencil. He never knocked. He never said it. And then it was too late. Emery pressed his forehead against his knees. The transmigration itself began to feel like a curse. He had traded one life where he was invisible for another where he was hunted. One world where no one noticed him for another where everyone wanted him dead. I'm not even real here. I'm a ghost wearing a dead man's skin. The body will be executed. The consciousness will just stop. And no one in either world will remember I existed. He reached for the bond one more time. Straining. Willing the medallion to pulse. To flicker. To show any sign that Lysander was still out there. Still trying. Still. Nothing. The silence answered. Absolute. Final. Emery closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. He didn't hear the footsteps until they were directly outside. Not guards. The rhythm was wrong. Too fast. Too light. Too careful. Someone who didn't want to be followed. A key turned. The door opened. Lysander stood in the threshold. He looked terrible. The controlled composure was gone. His shirt was torn at the sleeve. A cut above his left eyebrow had dried blood trailing toward his jaw. His hair was loose, wild, and his eyes, those dark, assessing eyes, were burning with something Emery had never seen in them before. Fear. Not for himself. For Emery. You're alive, Lysander said. The words came out rough. Strained. As if he'd been holding his breath for hours. The bond. Blocked. Vex people found a way to interfere with the medallion's frequency. I couldn't reach you. Couldn't hear you. Couldn't. He stopped himself. Drew a breath. Steadied. We need to move. Now. Emery stood. His legs shook. How did you get in? I have people inside the council still loyal to me. 2. Only 2. The rest have been threatened or bought. Lysander stepped inside, pulling something from inside his jacket. A folded document, singed at the edges. I also have this. The burned memo. From the archives. Vex ordered a systematic destruction of all documents related to the building collapse investigation. Every file. Every report. Every witness statement. His burning everything. Lysander's jaw tightened. Which means the evidence is real and dangerous enough to destroy his entire faction. How did you get it? One of my archivists pulled it from the furnace before it burned completely. A pause. Something shifted in Lysander's expression. He didn't make it out. The weight of that statement settled between them. Someone had died to save this piece of paper. Someone loyal. Someone unnamed. Another death connected to Vex. Another life discarded to protect a lie. Can you walk? Lysander asked. Yes. Then follow me. Don't speak. Don't stop. The lower corridors have 3 patrol rotations. I've timed them. We have 11 minutes to reach the eastern exit. They moved through stone corridors that smelled of dust and old secrets. Lysander led with the confidence of someone who had spent months mapping escape routes he hoped he'd never need. Left. Right. Down a flight of narrow stairs. Through a door that shouldn't have been unlocked. The night air hit Emery's face like cold water. Freedom. For the moment. A carriage waited in the shadows of the council building's service entrance. Lysander pushed Emery inside, followed, and knocked twice on the roof. The driver didn't speak. The horses began to move. In the darkness of the carriage, Emery could finally see Lysander clearly. The exhaustion. The fury. The cut on his brow that he hadn't bothered to clean. What happened to you? Emery asked. Vex called an emergency session of the council. 17 members. He presented a motion to strip me of Regent authority on grounds of compromised judgment. Lysander's voice was flat. Controlled. The motion passed. 12-5. The air left Emery's lungs. You're not Regent anymore. Not officially. As of 4 hours ago, I'm a private citizen with no political authority and a warrant for obstruction of justice. He almost smiled. Almost. Vex was very efficient. Then why are you still helping me? Lysander looked at him. In the darkness, stripped of title and power and the careful architecture of political survival, he looked like exactly what he was. A man who had made his choice and would not unmake it. Because you asked, he said simply. Because Thorn never did. Because 10 years of silence is enough. The carriage turned sharply. Through the narrow window, Emery glimpsed the city's eastern district, narrower streets, older buildings, the kind of neighborhood where powerful people didn't look. Where are we going? A safe house. One of my engineers has a workshop in the industrial quarter. Vex doesn't know about it. Lysander unfolded the burned memo. But we can't hide forever. The execution is scheduled for dawn tomorrow. If we don't present evidence before then, they'll kill me. They'll kill Thorn's body. And everything inside it. Lysander's voice hardened. Which includes you. The carriage stopped. They stepped out into a narrow alley behind a building that smelled of iron and machine oil. Lysander led him through a side door, up a flight of stairs, into a workshop cluttered with drafting tools and architectural models. Two of Lysander's engineers were waiting. They looked tense, armed, ready for something they hoped wouldn't come. Lysander spread the burned memo on a work table alongside the documents they'd gathered the night before. Here's where we stand, he said. The burned memo proves Vex knew about the structural flaw. The metal supports at the site prove he tried to fix it secretly. Thorn's removal from the project proves he was being set up as a scapegoat. His finger traced a line on the document. But none of this is enough for the council to override the execution order. Vex controls the council now. He'll reject any evidence we present as fabricated by a discredited regent. Then we don't present it to the council. Lysander looked up. What? The council is compromised. You just said that. 12 members voted against you. Vex controls the majority. Presenting evidence to them is like presenting a defense to a jury that's already been paid. Emery leaned forward. We present it to the public. Silence. The engineers exchanged glances. The public execution, Lysander said slowly. You want to interrupt the execution itself. I want to stand on that platform and make every person in that square see what Vex has done. Not through the council. Not through official channels. Through the evidence itself, in front of witnesses he can't silence. That's insane. It's architecture. Emery's voice steadied. Thorn's knowledge and his own understanding merged. Thorn used to say buildings are arguments in stone. They speak for themselves if you know how to read them. The evidence speaks for itself. We just need to put it where people can see it. Lysander stared at him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not agreement exactly. Recognition. The look of someone seeing a person they thought they understood suddenly reveal new dimensions. If this fails, Lysander said quietly, we both die. If we do nothing, I die anyway. Emery held his gaze. And you spend the rest of your life knowing you could have stopped it. The bond between them, dark, blocked, severed by council interference, flared once. Briefly, barely a flicker. But real. Both of them felt it. Lysander exhaled slowly. Dawn. The execution square. We'll need the documents copied. Distributed to reliable witnesses before the event. People who can't be silenced afterward. I'll handle the copies, one of the engineers said. I'll position people in the crowd, the other added. Lysander nodded. Then looked at Emery. You understand what you're doing. Going back to that platform. Standing where they want to kill you. Making yourself the most visible person in the city. Thorn spent his whole life hiding. You're not Thorn. No. Emery's voice was quiet. But I'm wearing his body. I'm carrying his name. And if this is how his story ends, I want it to be different than what they wrote for him. Lysander reached across the table. His hand covered Emery's. Not romantic. Not possessive. Grounding. The way you hold on to someone who is about to walk into fire. Dawn, Lysander said. Dawn, Emery answered. Outside the workshop windows, the city was sleeping. The execution square was being prepared. Garrett Vex was resting comfortably in his chambers, assured of his victory by morning. He didn't know about the burned memo. He didn't know about the engineers. He didn't know about the two people in a cluttered workshop, planning to dismantle his empire with nothing but truth and the desperate courage to make people see it. The lamp on the work table burned through the night. The execution square was already full before dawn. Hundreds of citizens pressed against the barriers. Council officials occupied the elevated viewing box. Guards lined the platform where the noose hung waiting. The sky was pale grey, the sun not yet risen, the air cold enough to see breath. Garrett Vex stood at the front of the viewing box. He was smiling. Not openly, that would be unseemly, but the satisfaction was there, tucked into the corners of his mouth, radiating from his posture. He had won. The Regent was disgraced. The architect was about to die. The evidence was ash. He didn't notice the figures moving through the crowd. Lysander's engineers had worked through the night. Copies of the burned memo, distributed to merchants and journalists and minor officials who owed Lysander personal debts. Witness statements from workers at the collapse site. Diagrams showing the reinforcement supports added after construction. All of it passed hand to hand through the gathering crowd like slow-burning fuse. Emery stood at the edge of a side street, hidden in shadow. The guards hadn't come for him yet. Lysander's people had falsified transfer documents, delayed the prisoner retrieval, bought them precious minutes. You don't have to do this part. Lysander stood beside him. In the grey pre-dawn light, his face looked carved from stone. Tired. Determined. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned but not bandaged. Yes, I do. Emery touched the medallion. Still dark. Still blocked. But he could feel something now, not the bond, but the memory of it. The shape of a door that wasn't locked, just closed. Thorn never knocked on your door. He never let himself be seen. If I'm going to die in his body, I'm going to do the one thing he couldn't. What's that? Make them look. Lysander's hand found his. Brief. Warm. Then released. Stay alive, Lysander said. The bond isn't broken. Just blocked. When the time comes, I'll reach for you. And I'll answer. They separated. Lysander moved toward the crowd's eastern edge, where his engineers had positioned the loudest voices, the most influential witnesses. Emery stepped into the open and let the guards find him. The platform was rougher than he remembered. Splinters. Bloodstains from previous executions, scrubbed but not erased. The noose hung at the center like a question waiting for an answer. Guards positioned him beneath it. The crowd's murmur shifted. Recognition, surprise, the hungry attention of people who had come to watch someone die and were now seeing something unexpected. The condemned man was supposed to be broken. Defeated. Silent. Emery stood straight. His eyes swept the crowd until they found Vex in the viewing box. He held that gaze. Didn't look away. Vex's smile flickered. Citizens of the council. Vex stepped forward, his voice amplified by the square's acoustics. We gather today to witness justice. Architect Thorn was found guilty of structural sabotage resulting in 3 deaths. The council has reviewed the evidence. The sentence is death. A pause. He was waiting for something. Perhaps for Emery to weep. To beg. To give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing a broken man. Emery gave him nothing. Before the sentence is carried out, Vex continued, a slight edge entering his voice. Does the condemned have final words? This was the moment. The dangerous, irreversible, absolutely necessary moment. Emery stepped forward, not toward the noose, but toward the edge of the platform. Toward the crowd. I am not Thorn. The words carried. The square went quiet. Vex's expression tightened. The condemned is clearly. The man whose body I'm wearing was innocent. Emery's voice strengthened. Surprisingly steady. He didn't sabotage that building. The structural flaw was discovered by Garrett Vex himself. Garrett Vex hired workers to install secret reinforcements. Garrett Vex used cheap materials that corroded and failed. And when the building collapsed, Garrett Vex destroyed the evidence and blamed an architect he had already discredited. Silence. Then murmurs. Then shouts. This is absurd, Vex snapped. Guards. The evidence is in this square. Emery raised his voice over the growing noise. Copies of a council memo with Vex seal. Witness statements from the workers who installed the reinforcements. Proof that this man knew about the structural failure before the collapse. Proof that he killed Harlow Decker to keep him silent. Proof that has been burning documents for days. Vex's face had gone white. Execute him. Now. The executioner stepped forward. The crowd surged against the barriers. Some were shouting for the execution. Some were shouting for Vex. Some had pulled out the distributed documents and were reading them aloud to anyone who would listen. The door wasn't locked. Just closed. Emery reached for the medallion. For the bond. For the connection he'd felt dim and flickering in the dark. Lysander. Now. Please. Now. The medallion exploded with light. Blue fire erupted from Emery's chest. Visible, undeniable, impossible to ignore. The entire square gasped. Guards stumbled backward. The executioner froze with his hand still reaching for the rope. And from the eastern edge of the crowd, another light answered. Brighter. Stronger. The historian's medallion around Lysander's neck blazing like a star reborn. I am Lysander Cormac, former regent of this council. His voice cut through the chaos. The crowd parted around him as he strode toward the platform. Someone tried to block his path, an official in Vex colors, and was shoved aside by witnesses who had just finished reading the burned memo. This execution is false judgment. The condemned man is innocent. And Garrett Vex, Lysander's voice dropped to something cold and absolute, is guilty of murder, conspiracy, and the systematic destruction of council evidence. I have the documents. I have the witnesses. And I am placing myself under public arrest to present this evidence before the full council and every citizen here. Vex lunged toward the platform, fury cracking his composure. You have no authority. You were stripped of your title. I have the authority of truth. Lysander climbed the platform steps. Guards moved to intercept him, then hesitated. Witnesses were surging forward. The crowd was no longer a crowd. It was an audience witnessing something unprecedented. And I have a medallion designed centuries ago to bond only with honest testimony. This artifact activated for Thorn the moment he denied the charges. It has burned with his truth every day since. He held up the medallion, its blue light casting shadows across the square. You cannot fake this. You cannot forge this. And you cannot execute a man who has been validated by an artifact of the council itself. Vex's hand moved. A weapon appeared, small, concealed, drawn from inside his formal robes. Emery saw it before anyone else. Saw the trajectory. Saw the target. He moved without thinking. Not away from danger. Toward it. His body, Thorn's body, colliding with Lysander's, shoving him sideways. The shot cracked through the square. Pain. White hot. Somewhere in the shoulder. Emery's shoulder. Thorn's shoulder. It didn't matter whose anymore. Lysander caught him before he fell. The medallions, pressed together by proximity, flared so bright that the entire square seemed to catch fire. The medallion bond is truth-bearing evidence. Lysander's voice was ragged now, furious, desperate, holding Emery against his chest. This man is innocent. This execution is injustice. And I am demanding a formal investigation into Garrett Vex's crimes. The crowd erupted. Not in violence. In witness. People who had received the documents were shouting confirmation. Merchants. Journalists. Minor officials. A dozen voices became 100. The guards hesitated. Their hands moved toward weapons, then stopped. This wasn't a riot. This was a city seeing its own government exposed in real time. Vex stood frozen on the viewing box. His weapon was still raised. His face was no longer composed. It was the face of a man watching his entire empire collapse in the space of 5 minutes. Council officials were already moving toward him. Not to protect him. To distance themselves. The political calculus had shifted. 12 votes against Lysander yesterday meant nothing when evidence was being distributed to the entire square. When a truth medallion blazed like judgment. When the condemned architect was bleeding from a wound delivered by the chief architect himself. Vex turned. tried to flee. Guards loyal to the old order, guards who had just watched their master shoot an unarmed man in front of hundreds, didn't move to stop him. But Lysander's engineers did. They closed in from the edges of the square. Quiet, efficient, unstoppable. The same people who had distributed evidence through the night now ensured the guilty could not escape the morning. Emery woke slowly. Not all at once. Not clean. Just drifting back. Pain came first. Dull and distant, muffled by whatever medicine was working through his system. The shoulder. The wound. The price of stepping between a bullet and the person who mattered. Then the sound. A steady beep. Some kind of monitoring device. Not familiar. Not modern. But recognizable. Medical. He was somewhere being cared for. Then the scent. Cedarwood and old paper. Lysander. His voice came out rough. Barely a whisper. But the figure beside the bed stirred immediately. You're awake. Lysander looked worse than before. The cut on his brow had finally been bandaged. His clothes were different, cleaner, but still plain. His hair was loose, and the exhaustion in his face had deepened into something permanent. But his eyes, when they met Emery's, were not the eyes of a defeated man. Vex? Emery asked. In custody. The council has reconvened under emergency oversight. The burned memo has been authenticated. The reinforcement supports have been documented. The workers who installed them have given testimony. Lysander paused. Harris confessed to the assassination plot before they could detain him separately. He's been telling investigators everything for 2 days. 2 days. Emery closed his eyes briefly. I was unconscious for 2 days. The bullet hit your shoulder. Missed anything vital, but you lost blood. The physicians said you needed rest more than anything else. A pause. Thorne's body was already weakened. The suppressants. The stress. The trial. He was dying before any of this started. Yes. Emery opened his eyes. Looked at the ceiling. At the room. At the man sitting beside his bed. And you? What happens to you? Lysander almost smiled. The council voted to restore my position this morning. Unanimous. Apparently, exposing corruption while bleeding in front of hundreds of witnesses makes for compelling political rehabilitation. His voice turned dry. I've been reinstated as regent. With full authority. And a mandate to investigate every structural project Vex office has touched in the past decade. That's decades of work. I know. It's exactly what I wanted. Lysander's expression shifted. But I'm not staying in the position permanently. What? There's a younger official. Someone I've been mentoring. She's been handling the administrative work I've been neglecting while chasing Vex. She's ready. I'm going to recommend her as my successor within the year. He paused. Once the investigation is stable. Once the council has cleaned house. Once I've made sure. Made sure of what? Lysander looked at him. The medallion, returned to his neck, glowing softly, pulsed once. That you're safe. That the bond is secure. That whatever happens next. He stopped. Started again. I spent 10 years not saying what I should have said. Not doing what I should have done. Not being seen by the one person I wanted to see me. I'm not spending the next 10 years the same way. Emery's heart, Thorne's heart, his heart, it didn't matter, stumbled. The bond, Emery said quietly. It was blocked. The whole time I was in that cell. But right before the execution, I reached for you anyway. Through the dark. And you answered. I always would have answered. The bond doesn't create connection. It reveals what's already there. Lysander reached out. His hand, open. Palm up. Not demanding. Offering. The medallion is dormant now. I could put it away. I could let the bond fade. You could go. Find a way back to your own world. Your own body. Your own life. The artifact doesn't hold you here. And if I don't want to go? The question hung in the air between them. Simple. Terrifying. Real. Lysander's hand didn't waver. Then stay. Emery looked at his borrowed hands. Thorn's hands. The architect's hands that had designed buildings and filed complaints and never once knocked on the door of the person he loved. He was too proud to beg. Too scared to reach out. Too silent to be saved. Emery was not Thorn. He was a consciousness from another world, trapped in a stranger's body, facing a future that had no precedent in law or custom or history. He didn't know what he was. He didn't know what he had the right to become. But he knew one thing Thorn had never known. What it felt like to be chosen. No, Emery said. I'm staying. Lysander's hand closed around his. They didn't kiss. Didn't confess. Didn't turn the moment into a dramatic resolution that would have been dishonest about the work still ahead. The uncertainty that still remained. The questions about Emery's legal status and Lysander's political future that no one had answers for yet. They sat in the quiet room, this unlikely pair of damaged people, connected by an artifact that had only ever revealed what was already there, and held each other's hands while the city outside slowly woke from its nightmare. The medallion pulsed once. Gently. From where it rested against Lysander's chest. Not demanding. Just acknowledging the bond that had always been possible. The truth that had always been waiting. The choice that had finally been made.